Hi, I'm Arleen. My sister banned me from her holiday party because she said having a server in the room would be off-brand. I wasn't just uninvited, I was erased. But I showed up anyway, carrying something she didn't expect, something she couldn't reframe or rewrite. What would you do if your own family acted like you were nothing more than a label? Have you ever been pushed aside just to protect someone else's image? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I truly want to know. And if you've ever felt like the extra seat at the table was never really yours, this story might be for you. The clinking of silverware and the low hum of jazz floated through the dining room of Villa d'Avril. I was standing near the back entrance, clipboard in hand, watching the early prep for the evening's wine pairings when my phone vibrated. It was a calendar alert. Sharp Family Holiday Dinner, December 23rd. I hadn't received an invite. Not a text, not a call, nothing. It wasn't unusual for Noelle to plan things last minute, but this felt different. I stood frozen for a beat, blinking at the reminder like it might vanish. But it stayed, pulsing softly on the screen, a reminder of what I wasn't part of. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, syrupy sweet. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. Noelle's hosting this year. It's going to be very intimate, just a few people from her circle, you know?" My throat tightened. "Am I not invited?" She hesitated. "We just thought, with your schedule and how busy the restaurant is, maybe it's best if you skip it this year. Noelle's trying to keep things simple." I didn't ask again. I just muttered something polite, then hung up. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. Back in the break room, I logged into my work email to focus on something else. Anything else. That's when I saw it. Subject: Sharp Family Holiday Dinner confirm attendance. Sent from Noelle's company account. 2 days ago. But the meeting had been canceled. I clicked. The note said, rescinded by sender. I had been invited. And then, uninvited. Not overlooked, not forgotten. Erased. I stared at the email for a long time like it was a piece of evidence in a case I hadn't realized I was building. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. My mind replayed images from past holidays. Me arranging desserts, clearing plates, refilling drinks. Noelle in satin dresses, laughing near the fire while I washed up in the kitchen. I wasn't family at those gatherings. I was staff. Friendly staff, smiling in the background of every photo. This year, even that role had been stripped away. I sat back in my chair. The realization wasn't loud. It was subtle, sharp, like the click of a door quietly locking behind you. This wasn't a dinner. It was a branding event, a photo op, and a woman who worked in hospitality, regardless of how high she'd climbed, wasn't on brand. I whispered out loud, "I'm not even the prop anymore." No tears came, just clarity. I opened a folder on my desktop marked Degree. Inside were 3 files, a JPEG of my diploma, a PDF of my transcript, and an audio file labeled Holiday Plan. I opened a blank Word document and typed a title. The Gift. I wouldn't go to that dinner. I had somewhere better to be. And this time, the gift would be mine to give. There's a scent I can't escape. It follows me every December, clinging to cold windows and grocery store aisles. Cinnamon and nutmeg. Every time I smell it, I'm back in my mother's kitchen, the heat from the oven warming the room, the buzz of conversation spilling in from the living room. That year, I made the pie from scratch, my own recipe, 6 hours of careful preparation. I remember brushing the braided crust with egg wash, watching it bubble and brown just right. I remember thinking, for once, maybe they'd notice something I brought to the table. Not what I carried or served or cleaned, but what I made. I placed the pie gently on the center of the dining table and left to refill the ice bucket. When I came back, it was gone. I blinked, then checked the counter. Nothing. The trash bin? Empty. That's when I saw the box, clear plastic from the grocery store, tucked behind a wine bottle. Inside was a bland-looking apple pie, store-bought. "Hunter's not big on spices," my mother said, appearing behind me with a glass of red. "Your version's a bit experimental. Better safe than sorry." I opened my mouth, closed it again, just nodded. 3 days later, a card arrived in the mailbox. I remember the gold foil edges and perfect cursive. To the best hostess. Inside, Hunter had written, "Best pie I've ever had. You're a holiday queen, Lorna." I held the card between my fingers, like it might split in half under the weight of all the things it didn't say. I laughed low and short. Not from humor, from the absurdity, from how loud silence can sound when it's wrapped in store-bought sincerity. It wasn't the first time. There was the birthday party when I hung decorations all night, and Noelle got praise for the perfect setup. The time she cried over her college essay, and I stayed up editing it with her, only for her to thank her mentors during the family dinner. And maybe I would have forgiven it all if once, just once, someone had looked at me and said, "I see what you did, I see you." But invisibility, I've learned, isn't always accidental. Sometimes it's inherited. Sometimes it's a system. And in our family, I was taught to blend in. Serve first, ask later, be useful, be quiet. I didn't even notice how much I'd erased myself until I saw my name missing from that card. Now I see it everywhere. I stand in my kitchen and open the fridge. There's a half-eaten pie I made 2 nights ago. Same recipe, same spices, no audience. I take a slice, cold and honest, and eat it over the sink. Next time, I won't bring it to their table. Next time, they'll come to mine. It was Noelle's college celebration. One of those rented Airbnb catered afternoon affairs with fairy lights and custom napkins. Everyone was there. Relatives I hadn't seen in years. Neighbors who spoke about her like she was their own, and acquaintances I didn't know could afford the gas to Charleston. They went around the room sharing future goals. Noelle had just announced her acceptance into a graduate program in New York. Toasts had been made. Champagne had been poured. I waited until the room settled, then quietly said I'd been thinking of enrolling in a few online classes. I barely got the words out. Noelle laughed, placing a manicured hand on our uncle's arm. "Oh, that's so sweet. I remember when I used to help her with her essays back in high school." Everyone chuckled. I smiled too, just enough to not make it awkward. Later that night, I tried again. I found my mother in the kitchen, refilling wine glasses and organizing leftovers with surgical precision. "I've been seriously looking at programs," I said. "Part-time ones. Flexible." She hummed, poured another glass, and said, "That's nice, dear," like I'd just told her the weather would be warm tomorrow. She didn't even ask which school. It wasn't the lack of support that stung. It was the complete lack of acknowledgement. 2 weeks later, a coworker texted me a photo from a local magazine. "Look who made the spotlight!" It was Noelle. The headline read, "Women who inspire local leaders share what drives them." I clicked. In the article, Noelle said, "My sister inspired me by going back to school even after all these years. I'm so proud to be her role model." My name wasn't there. Not once. She had turned my ambition into her narrative arc, cast herself as the reason I had hope at all. She made me a side character in my own progress. I didn't even get a line. It wasn't just about stealing the spotlight. She had rewritten my story in her voice. I stared at the magazine page for a long time. I thought about posting a comment, tagging the article, maybe writing an open letter. But then I closed the tab. Not because I forgave her, because I knew no one would believe me. Not yet. So I started documenting. Screenshots, emails, copies of the business registration, text messages, dates, times. Not for revenge, not yet, for memory. I stopped replying in the family group chat. I muted it. I unsubscribed from her podcast newsletter. I started archiving things, little by little. In my bedroom, I pinned the article to the corkboard above my desk, right next to my resume. Beside it, I wrote one sentence in red ink. This time, they'll hear my voice, unedited. It was one of those afternoons where time moved slow enough for the silence to settle into the walls. I sat at the kitchen table across from my mother, watching her slice pears for a salad she wouldn't eat. The radio played something soft in the background. I mentioned, almost casually, that my back had been killing me after the last few weeks of doubles. She didn't even pause. "You chose to work on your feet. That's what waitresses do," rang Chu. She didn't look up. Didn't even notice she'd said something that lodged itself like a splinter in my spine. It wasn't mean. It wasn't sharp. It was worse. It was indifferent. Final. a statement of truth in her eyes, unworthy of discussion. I remember freezing mid-sentence, blinking at her as if she might take it back, clarify, offer a chuckle, say she didn't mean it that way. But she moved on to slicing the avocado. That's the thing about growing up being the help in your own house. You don't notice when you stop being a daughter and start being support staff. I thought back to the years I covered electric bills without asking for reimbursement, the groceries that showed up in the fridge with no one asking how. I remembered the time I repaired the leak under the sink using a how-to video at midnight. No one ever said thank you, not because they were ungrateful, because they never noticed I did it at all. That was my role, not the guest of honor, not even the guest. I was the foundation, and foundations aren't made to be admired. They're made to hold the rest. Months later, my mother fell ill. A fainting spell at the grocery store. Nothing too serious, but enough to land us in urgent care. I drove her, sat in the waiting room with her insurance card in hand. The nurse leaned in with a clipboard and asked, "Emergency contact?" Without hesitation, my mother said, "My younger daughter, Noelle." I didn't say anything. I just sat there holding the card, wondering if my hands were shaking from anger or from how cold the room suddenly felt. On the drive home, we didn't speak. She asked to stop for soup. I pulled into the first place I saw and kept the engine running. She thanked me, called me sweet, but that's not the same as being seen. That night, I sat at my desk with a legal pad and wrote a letter I never intended to send. It wasn't even a letter, really. Just a list of everything I remembered doing for her. Grocery runs, ER visits, med pickups, bill payments, all of it. I signed it at the bottom, then I crossed my name out. Because I knew, if she didn't say it, if she couldn't name me in the room, she'd never acknowledge it on the page. I folded the paper, slipped it into the nightstand next to a photo of the two of us from years ago. The colors were faded, the frame was chipped, our faces blurred together in the glass. Next time I won't stand there and let her forget me. It started with a call just before midnight. I remember staring at the name flashing on my screen, Noelle, and nearly ignoring it. But curiosity wins when family is involved, even when history warns you otherwise. She sounded excited, the kind of excited that makes people speak too fast, like their mouth can't keep up with their ambition. She was starting her own studio, media, branding, influence curation. The words buzzed like neon signs. She needed help with registration, something that made her look more established on paper. A co-founder, someone mature and reliable, just for optics. "I'd never ask anyone else," she said. "You've always had that grounded energy. Investors love that." I agreed. I didn't even hesitate. I transferred a small amount for fees, signed what she needed, felt a flicker of closeness, sisterhood. Maybe this would be a turning point, something we built, even if only symbolically, together. Weeks later, the site went live. I scrolled through page after page, Noelle's headshot, mission statements in bold team bios. Except mine wasn't there, not even in fine print. I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, it's better this way," she said, brushing it off. "You're so busy at the restaurant. It's just branding." She said it like I should thank her, like it was protection. I swallowed my reaction whole, but a new space opened inside me. Quiet, cold, organized. It wasn't rage. It was a room I'd never needed before. Months passed. I overheard her on a call while visiting our mother's house. She was pitching to an investor, talking about her early backing, how she had someone from hospitality lend credibility in the first round. She used phrases I recognized. They were mine. I found the pitch deck online. Page 6. Advised by senior figure in food and beverage service. There was my resume. No name, but my history, my language, my job title from a year ago, the phrasing I used in my old LinkedIn bio. I didn't say a word. I just took a screenshot, emailed it to myself, and saved the link. One more entry in the folder I now updated daily. You may take me off the website, but not from my own history. I didn't confront her directly, not yet. I contacted a friend who worked in small business compliance, asked about intellectual property, about silent investors. I didn't need to sue, I needed to understand. I printed everything, read it twice, then took a red pen and started underlining. Not in anger, in clarity. Weeks later, at a family brunch, Noelle held court in the way she always did. Legs crossed, voice confident, storytelling in full swing. "Starting from scratch," she said, smiling wide, "is what builds character." I didn't plan to speak, but the words found their way. "Scratch? Is that what we're calling capital investment now?" The table fell silent. Noelle blinked, then laughed a little too loudly. "You're funny." I didn't respond. I just raised my glass of water. Everyone else changed the subject. She didn't mention the studio again that day. That night, I renamed a folder on my laptop from family_history.zip to evidence.zip. This wasn't memory anymore. It was record. The bank smelled like bleach and printer ink. I stood at the counter, tapping the screen of the ATM again, then again. The number staring back at me didn't make sense. I checked the routing, the account name, then the transaction history. My savings account, years of double shifts and ignored vacations, was empty. "Can you tell me when the withdrawal happened?" I asked the teller. She scrolled, then read flatly. 3 weeks ago, by the joint account holder." The words hit me harder than if someone had screamed. Lorna, my mother. When I got home, I didn't even sit down. I called her. "Noelle needed help with the down payment," she said, as if it were a line from a shopping list. "She has a family now. You'll be fine." I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I knew arguing would change nothing. I just said, "Thanks for letting me know," and hung up. That night, I opened my file drawer, pulled out my bank statements, scanned every one, and saved them to a USB drive. Then I called HR and rerouted my paycheck to a new account. No joint holders, no shared access, just me. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. The following weekend, I passed by Noelle's new house on my way to the farmer's market. It was beautiful. White trim, wreath on the door, flowers that looked too perfect to be real. On impulse, I parked. In the passenger seat, I had a small plant in a brown paper bag. Something green, something neutral. When she answered the door, her smile was there, but her eyes didn't match. "Oh," she said, stepping out and half closing the door behind her. "Now's not really a good time. Hunter's family is inside." I glanced past her shoulder. I could see people in blazers, someone laughing with a glass of red. "We're keeping things curated," she added, as if that explained everything. "Are you saying I'm not welcome?" I asked softly. She hesitated just long enough to answer me. "It's not personal. It's just image." I nodded. Not because I understood, but because I finally stopped expecting anything else. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment for a long time, engine off, hands on the wheel. It was cold, but I didn't feel it. I'd helped fund that house, and I couldn't even walk through its door. I opened my email and started typing, not to Noelle, to a legal advisor I'd met through a friend. I wasn't looking to start a war. I just needed clarity, boundaries, definitions, because apparently, family wasn't one of them. Later, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence in the margin of a grocery list. "She may have a house, but I own the silence I'm about to break." Then I opened my laptop and clicked on a folder I had renamed the night before. Phase 2. The invitation came from a cousin I barely spoke to. A forwarded email with a pastel header and a formal RSVP link. "Sharp Family Pre-Holiday Soiree," it read, hosted by Noelle. Dress code, upscale casual. Location, her new house. Time, 6 p.m. sharp. I hadn't been on the original list, that much was clear. The cousin thought I already had the details. I didn't correct her. I clicked RSVP, checked attending, and marked the day in my calendar. Not as a guest, but as a witness. That evening, I arrived in a muted navy dress and flats. I didn't expect warmth. I didn't expect acknowledgement. But I didn't expect categories. Inside, the dining room shimmered with curated detail. Golden garlands, tiny candles, soft jazz humming low. At the long table, there were 3 distinct place settings. Some guests had gold-rimmed plates with gold flatware. Others had silver-edged plates, still lovely but second tier. And then, the final tier. Plain white plates, mismatched forks. Mine was white. At the far end, corner seat, my name scribbled small, barely legible. I sat down, silent, hands folded in my lap. A cousin leaned over, whispering, Noelle said it's part of the vibe curation, to reflect different circles, nothing personal. I looked down at the plate. Suddenly it felt oversized, heavy, too stark for the table, like it hadn't been set. It had been placed. My value had always been transactional. I realized that then. To Noelle, people were tools, tokens, tiers, and me? I hadn't even been in the tier system until now. This was her version of generosity. Later, during toasts, one of Noelle's clients praised her. "You've built so much, and you still seem so grounded. You must come from a strong family." Noelle lifted her glass, smile poised. "I was raised as an only child. I had to figure everything out on my own." The silence afterward was immediate and full. I was standing 6 feet away, sipping water, near a bookshelf arranged by spine color. She knew I was there. Our cousin glanced at me, then looked away. I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. I excused myself before dessert, walked out the front door without a word. But before I left, I slid a folded linen napkin under Noelle's dessert fork. In careful handwriting, I'd written one line. "Being silent doesn't mean being absent. Being polite doesn't mean being weak." No name, no threat, but she would know. That night, in the dim light of my bedroom, I clicked into the folder I'd been building for months. I changed the name from evidence.zip to something that felt truer now. Lastsupper.zip. Let them digest this. The driveway was full of cars I didn't recognize, sleek, imported, leased under names that looked good on paper. Through the frosted window panes, I could see the warm glow of curated elegance. Gold accents, floating candles, servers in black aprons gliding by. But I wasn't looking at the decor. I was holding a silver-wrapped box, tied neatly with a white ribbon, no tag attached. Noelle didn't know I was coming. That was the point. When I stepped through the front door, conversations quieted like someone had pressed mute. A few heads turned, eyebrows raised. I saw her near the fireplace, framed by a circle of guests, champagne flute in hand. Her smile faltered, then tightened. "You weren't supposed to come," she said, voice low, controlled. I met her gaze without blinking. Exactly. I didn't wait for permission. I walked to the center of the room, set my bag on the table beside the dessert tray, and pulled out my phone. My hands didn't shake. "Excuse me," I said to the room. Conversations paused again. People turned. I tapped the Bluetooth speaker on the bar. It connected with a soft chime. And then her voice, Noelle's, filled the air. "She's just a server. Honestly, she should be honored if I let her pass out hors d'oeuvres. At least then she'd serve a real purpose." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was electric. One of the guests let out a small gasp. Someone else coughed, then stopped. Noelle's face had gone pale, but she stood frozen. I let it hang for a moment before speaking. "And that same clip," I said, holding the phone up, "was edited and featured in her podcast last month, right after her forgiveness and personal growth episode." I looked around. She turned her cruelty into content, gave herself a redemption arc she never earned. Hunter slowly set down his drink on the mantel, his eyes fixed on Noelle like he didn't recognize the woman standing next to him. I reached into my purse again and pulled out the silver box. Quietly, I placed it beneath the oversized tree in the corner. The lights twinkled around it, mocking the festivity of the moment. "This," I said, "is my RSVP." I unwrapped the ribbon slowly, lifted the lid. Inside was my diploma framed in clear acrylic, the seal still pristine. "I earned this," I said, voice steady. "While working double shifts, while paying bills that weren't mine, while being told I didn't belong in rooms like this." I held it up. "To everyone who decided my value didn't match your expectations, this is the piece of paper that says otherwise." No one applauded, but no one moved either. The stillness was louder than any applause. I turned to Noelle, who had yet to speak. "Some gifts," I said softly, "you can't return, like dignity or the truth." I walked out before anyone could follow, and for the first time in years, the night felt warm. She stepped into the night with nothing but her voice and her silence, and for the first time, both were enough. The next morning, my apartment felt foreign in its stillness. Not eerie, not heavy, just mine. The curtains shifted slightly with the breeze through the cracked window. I moved slowly through the kitchen, watering the plant on the windowsill, rinsing the plate I'd used the night before, wiping the counter twice. Not because it was dirty, but because the movement grounded me. My phone buzzed, 17 missed calls, voicemails from Lorna, a few texts from cousins, half sympathy, half curiosity. One from an aunt I hadn't seen in 5 years. "You were brave." I didn't respond to any of them. A week later, I heard from a cousin that Hunter had moved out. He packed everything, took the dog, no warning. He hadn't called me, he didn't have to. When I checked, Noelle's podcast had disappeared from every platform, her carefully curated brand gone. The redemption story she tried to sell now sat in shards across social media, mixed with screenshots of guest plate assignments and muffled audio clips no one could ignore anymore. At the grocery store, someone whispered her name behind a rack of greeting cards. I saw her once, weeks later, in the parking lot, head down, moving fast like the cold air might crack her wide open. For the first time in her life, Noelle didn't have a script to spin. Then came the voicemail. "You made your point, Arleen," my mother said. Her tone was tired, not angry. But this wasn't the way to do it. There was a long pause. "Still, your father says he's proud, even if he doesn't say it out loud." I listened to that message 3 times, then I deleted it. No saving, no replaying, just gone. I signed the lease on a house in Savannah the week after. Small porch, slanted floorboards, a kitchen that creaked when I moved. The first night there, I slept with the windows open, even though it was cold. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was earned. The degree stayed in the nightstand. I didn't hang it. I didn't need to. Sometimes I still dream of the table, not the one at Noelle's party, but the white plate, the one they gave me, the one meant to signal I didn't belong. In the dream, I don't reject it. I take the plate and place it at my own table. One setting, no ranking, no performance, just me. Some endings don't echo. They hum softly, reminding you, you don't need permission to exist. Sometimes the hardest thing is realizing that your worth won't always be recognized by the people you love most. But just because they don't see it, doesn't mean it isn't there. I spent years earning my place in a family that never gave me a seat at the table. In the end, I stopped waiting for their invitation and built my own table. And honestly, it feels good to finally sit down. You don't need approval to be proud of who you are. You don't need applause to know you've made it. Sometimes the quietest victories are the most powerful. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and let's talk. If this story resonated with you, leave a or comment 1 inch so I know you were here. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like it, I'd love to know why. What part didn't land for you? Let's have a real conversation. And hey, if you want more stories like this, ones that make you think, feel, and maybe even heal, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.